Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. So my name's Stephen Power, so I'll be hosting the webinar, and today I'm joined by Niall Keeley from the SMMT Oversight Office.
Hi everyone, good to be here today. Thank you all for joining.
So today, again, thank you for joining. We're going to go through non-conformities. So what are non-conformities? So basically, what is the definition of a non-conformity? Why are non-conformities raised, etc. And then we're going to go into a bit of detail in terms of where the trends are in terms of non-conformities that are being raised in IATF 16949 third-party audits. Finally, we're going to look at a bit in terms of what does CARA requirements mean? What is the responsibility in terms of responding to non-conformities? So that's a subject matter we're going to cover today. So a couple of things I need to advise you on first is that there is, if you want to ask a question, there is a question and answer section. If you want to put questions in there during the presentation, at the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer section with myself and Niall taking part. So during that session, we'll try and answer as many questions as we can get through in terms of anything that you want clarification on. We've also put in there a poll. So again, if we could encourage you to actually answer the poll, and that'll help us to decide on future subject matters that are of interest, and hopefully we can provide information in terms of what you actually need or what you're interested in. The other thing I've got to inform you about is we are actually recording this. So the reason we're recording is we put it on the website for people who aren't able to attend so that they can view it at a later date. So again, thank you all very much for attending. It does, it's great to see so many people today. So again, thank you ever so much for participating. So let's get started. I'm just going to go a bit about SMMT. So for anyone who doesn't understand us, so SMMT IF. So what are our core values? Why are we doing this sort of webinar? What are we, why are we doing it? Rather, would probably be a better question. So, our SMMT IF, we have very close links in terms of the actual standard itself through SMMT and its membership of the, being an actual member of the IATF, a voting member of the IATF. And the ideas are, and here that we try to develop and we try to encourage, are looking really in terms of the strategy for a management system. And the main thing about IATF is to look and focus on the manufacturing operations. Yeah, the core part of any organisation that's related to IATF are going to be around the manufacturing operations. So we've got other support operations, but everything supports the manufacturing operations. At the end of the day, the product is key, and that's where we need to focus on. So from looking at that, there's 4 key areas there. Manufacturing itself, but 3 supporting those. So basically the management systems of an organisation, your quality manual, your procedures, your processes that you've defined in terms of how you're going to actually create a particular product. Through that, we're looking at the new product introduction, the design, the development of not only the product itself, but also of the process. And then through your supply chain, how you get the parts to support your manufacturing process. And coming out of there's going to be the key drivers of any management system, your KPIs related to things like quality, costs, delivery, technology, customer experience, etc. So what we want to do is we want to offer not just a solution in terms of, an easy fix or let's use one particular tool, but look at an organisation in its total in terms of look at the key focus, which is going to be the manufacturing operations. So IATF itself, SMMT Industry Forum, our main capabilities and the 4 key areas, as I've just mentioned, the competitive strategy, new product introduction, the focusing on manufacturing operations, supported by the supply chain and how that supply chain works. The 3 main topics in terms of industry forum, what we're offering are consultancy, training, assessments and standards. So in terms of consultancy, we've always, we were originally set up by the government to support, especially on things like lean. I mean, that's where Industry Forum started in terms of developing, bringing about what is the key tools of lean, things like TPM, Kaizen, Kanban, just in time, etc. All of these were core tools that were provided in terms of consultancy, and it's something we still do in terms of an offering. The next is training. So in terms of training, we're very key in key areas such as IATF itself, VDA, ODET, in terms of MMOG. Likewise, assessments and standards. Again, we are if you like, the provider of the standards itself. If you want to buy a copy, obviously we offer that as an offering, as well as the AIAG core tool manuals, and likewise the VDA manuals. Again, we sell those all through our own organisation. So in terms of what we provide, like I said, we are actually approved by the IATF in terms of training. Again, we are a licensed provider for VDA. And then in terms of other offerings we have, we are the only UK provider of MMOG LE training. We also got very close links through the SMMT in terms of the National Automotive Supply Chain, and again looking at competitiveness in that in terms of delivering training, consultancy, etc. TPM is something we still offer, along with APIS in terms of, again, supply chain management. Okay, so sorry, a bit of an introduction there in terms of who we are, what we're offering, but let's get into some details. Let's start talking about nonconformities. Okay, so in terms of the presentation, what we were going to talk about is to start off really with the definition of what a nonconformity is. So we've taken ISO 19011. So when we're looking at ISO 19011, we're looking at that, and in terms of that has definitions for both conformity and non-conformity. So in terms of that, in terms of conformity, what that means is to conform, to meet or comply with a requirement. So when you're looking at any management system, and ISO 19011 is the guidelines for auditing, not auditing specifically quality management systems, but all management systems, we're looking at conformity to meet a requirement. Usually those requirements are going to come out of the standard to which you're being audited. So it could be ISO 14001, but likewise IATF 16949 in terms of, are you meeting the requirements? This is usually reported in things like a summary of the audit report. So this will detail where conformity has been demonstrated, and there's a clear objective evidence that you're meeting the requirements of the standard, and that has been assessed as part of the audit. What we mean by a non-conformity is where we can actually clearly see that a requirement has not been met, a requirement has not been achieved. So it's a very simple statement when you think about it. Conformity means to conform with a requirement. Non-conformity, there's evidence you are not conforming with a requirement that's stipulated in the standard, in the actual specification, etc., that you're actually looking at. So a requirement is a need, an expectation or an obligation. It could be stated, it could be implied by an organisation, its customer or other interested party. So when we're taking the definitions, and again, we've taken the definitions from 19011 in terms of what does a conformity, what does non-conformity look like. So hopefully that explains in terms of what we mean by a non-conformity. So non-conformity would be where there's clear evidence, and the evidence that we've seen in the audit means that a particular requirement of the standard has not been achieved. So basically from that, what we require would be corrective action to address the particular non-conformity. So IATF, in terms of definitions, goes a lot further than 19011. Because 19011, if you search through the document, it never tells you about major or minor. It talks about classification, and in that it says if it could be qualitative, it could be quantitative. So we could rank it 1 to 5, or we could class it major or minor. So there's no clear definition coming out of 19011 in terms of is it major, is it minor. IATF itself, and this you'll find in the rules to IATF, actually has a very clear definitions in terms of what findings should be categorised as. So the first one of those definitions is a major nonconformity. So if you go to the rules, the 6th edition rules, which were effective from the 1st of January this year, in there it has the clear definitions in terms of what a major nonconformity is. So in that they talk about the absence or total breakdown of a quality management system to meet an IATF requirement. So in truth, what does that mean? It means a breakdown of a quality system. So if you looked at something like internal audits, if we were looking into internal audits, there's clear evidence no audits have been performed over a period of time, then basically the system is no longer effective. So therefore, you could class that as a breakdown in a quality management system. It is no longer being maintained. So there's clear evidence that the system has stopped work. A number of minor nonconformities is a second classification. So what this means is if there's several findings against a particular clause of the standard, then what this would represent is a breakdown of the system. So again, it's a systemic error that means that the system is no longer functional. So basically, the system not only has one weaknesses, but multiple weaknesses against a particular requirement. Therefore, the classification would be up to a major nonconformity. The next one, probably more specific to IATF than any other standard, in terms of it's a failure to comply with IATF that would result in the probable shipment of non-conforming product. So the way I always used to describe this and describe it at an opening meeting would be if I was to find a micrometer in goods inwards, I would class it probably as a minor nonconformity. The reason being is subsequent processing would detect non-conforming product, meaning there's no risk to the customer. If the same micrometer is going to be used in dispatch, I'd class it as a major nonconformity, because basically the next person to inspect the product would be the customer. Therefore, the customer is at risk. So though it's the same cause, it's the same issue, it's the same device, its classification has to consider the risk to the customer. So always thinking of the risks to the customer in IATF in terms of going back to those core principles in terms of we're looking at the manufacturing process. Is the customer going to get good or bad product? So again, it's the categorization, the fault of what is the risk to the customer in this particular case. The other classification that's in there is a failure to comply with IATF that based on judgment and experience is likely to result in a failure of the system or to materially reduce its ability to ensure control processes and products. Sorry. So when we're looking at that, this is talking about basically if we feel that, if there's evidence there that the system is likely to fail in some way or form, that would result again in the shipment or could reduce its ability to provide adequate product. And in here, probably services in terms of delivery to the customer. So these are the classifications for major nonconformity. Okay, so let's have a look at minor and how that differs. So when we look at minor, in terms of definition, the first thing is a failure to comply with IATF that, if you like, the reverse of the last section, that based on judgment and experience is not likely to result in a failure of the system or reduce its ability. So it could be something that's found, though it's found and it's a clear non-conformance in terms of the requirement hasn't been met. The classification is based on the fact that there's no risk to the customer. The risk in terms of compliance to the standard is the reason for classification of a minor non-conformity in this case. It could be against the client's quality management system. So if you've defined a particular method of doing something in terms of your own quality management system, and there's evidence that's not being maintained, then again, this could be classed as a minor non-conformity. Or it could be against a single observed lapse. Say inspection hasn't happened on one occasion. This would be a single observed lapse. Yep, in terms of the customer, what we're looking at is there's a low risk to the customer because basically there's clear evidence other checks have taken place, but in one particular instance, there's no record of the check actually happening. So this would be the definition of a minor non-conformity. So when we're looking at it, we're thinking about definitions. What do I need to class it as? Do I need to class it as minor? Do I need to class it on major? But we're going to come on to that in a bit in terms of how we write a non-conformity. There are other types of findings. And again, if you read through the 6th edition, what it actually talks about is the two other type of findings, other than conformity that could go into a report, are an opportunity for improvement and positive aspects. So opportunities for improvement are quite difficult to write, especially in third-party audit reports, because a third-party audit report would ask for clear identification as to how it conforms. So if you've ever been in that incident where you're actually trying to say you could improve on this, although it fully conforms, makes it a very difficult subject matter to actually document, certainly document. Maybe explain might be easier, but to document why does it conform, but it could be improved, is a difficult subject matter. But it's perfectly justifiable to raise opportunities for improvement within an audit report. The reason behind the classification and the need to actually have classification is IATF were worried about weak grading. So basically people using opportunities for improvement instead of using a non-conformity system where corrective action would be a requirement in terms of certification. So there's always been a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on how to write an opportunity for improvement. It's not something that's banned, it's not something you can't write. Opportunities for improvement could be written, but a justification needs to be made to prevent weak grading, people using opportunities for improvement rather than using a non-conformity approach. Positive aspects, this is probably more emphasised in the 6th edition rules. And it's always been something that's there. Positive aspects, have always been something that we could actually report upon. And it's a strength, a good practice that's observed within a client's quality management system. But I think a lot of the times when we've read positive aspects, they've been literally around things like the housekeeping, rather than actually about the system itself. So when you're looking at a positive aspect, it could be something, a particular continuous improvement project that's had really strong results, or an action plan against a set objective that again has demonstrated, significant results in terms of, you've not only exceeded the target, you've maybe exceeded even a stretch target that you set yourselves. So again, positive aspects should be there. And again, they demonstrate conformity, if you like, in terms of one of the key emphases of the standard, which is continuing improvement. So positive aspects are something that should be considered and something that should be reported in terms of IATF. Okay, in terms of a non-conformity is, certainly for third-party auditors, has to be written in now 4 parts. So there's 4 sections to a non-conformity. So when you receive non-conformities, third-party, from your third-party certification body audits, there's going to be 4 parts to the actual non-conformity itself. So the first of those parts will be the statement of the non-conformity. This, if you like, is the most important part of it, because the statement of non-conformity must be expressed as an issue of the system. It's the statement of non-conformity. It should be expressed in terms of a person or incident, its objective evidence, So when we're looking at the statement of non-conformity, we usually relate this against a process. So when we use the words process, what we're actually meaning is basically a process is where there's a requirement, the organisation's set of activities to address that particular requirement. So writing a non-conformity using that, using the words "the process for" means the organisation's set of activities for a particular requirement of this standard are not effective. So usually the statement of non-conformity is going to be against a particular requirement, yeah? And the requirement is the next stage of the non-conformity document. So if in the requirement, what we're actually detailing there is what was the criteria that has not been addressed. So what is the actual clause, requirement, subclause, etc., where there's evidence, objective evidence that basically this requirement has not been met. So again, this is linked, all are linked together, but the requirement links very strongly to the statement of non-conformity, or should link very strongly to the statement of non-conformity. The objective evidence part is the section by which we document the facts in terms of basically here's the evidence that the particular requirement has not been addressed. The objective evidence is key in terms of a non-conformity writing, but too often the objective evidence becomes the focus of where people are trying to address the non-conformity. The non-conformity and what you address should always go back to the statement. Yeah. If your process for doing a particular task is not effective, it's not correct the issue. It's what we need to do is we need to go away and correct the root cause. What is wrong with the system that means the objective evidence actually happened? That's the whole purpose in terms of the way non-conformities are written. The final bit goes back to the bit that we've been talking about earlier, and that's the justification in terms of the classification of non-conformity. So why is it a major? Why is it a minor? So when we're looking at a non-conformity, this was brought in the last edition of the rules. And basically what they talked about there was we need to justify why we're classing it as a major and why we're classing it as a minor non-conformity. And one of the things we're looking at on that is basically what are the risks, yeah? So this is something that was introduced in terms of the 6th edition, something that has changed slightly there, is to consider the impact and the occurrence when making a justification. So what would be the impact in terms of the customer? What would be the impact in terms of the system? And what's the likelihood of it actually occurring again? Is it a single incident, etc.? Again, this was something that was introduced after the 6th edition rules to consider the impact in terms of the non-conformity. So that's how we should write a non-conformity. I mean, for myself, one of the key things I always used to do is I would always start when I was writing non-conformities in terms of the objective evidence. What was it I've seen? What evidence do I have in terms of a non-conformity? I would then link that to a requirement of the standard. I would try and use words from the requirement in terms of the statements of the non-conformity. So by doing it backwards, if you like, it's easier to write a non-conformity. But certainly looking at a non-conformity, the key thing to focus, if you're the organisation who's received a non-conformity, is what does the statement say? What is it that I need to address in our system to actually solve this non-conformity, not just correct the objective evidence. Okay, so backing on. So looking at the statistics, and I've used these statistics from the actual IATF website, the oversight website, and this was true of the 20th of April. So when we're looking at these, we're actually looking at where are the top 10 major non-conformities raised on IATF audits. So I don't know if you've used the IATF website, it's a very useful website, but if you go onto there, there's plenty of information. Don't know if you've noticed, it's just announced IATF now has 100,000 certificates. So that's something that's just been announced in terms of a milestone in terms of the standard. Another thing is the 25 years of the standard now. So it's now now been in operation at 25 years, the IATF standard itself. But looking at the top 10 major non-conformities, so you can see there in terms of what are the clauses against the non-conformities and where do they rank in terms of what percentage use that particular clause number in terms of a finding. So when you look and you start to analyse the data in terms of what's before us, we can see clear links in terms of what is being raised. So the rules are heavily influencing this. So if we look at the top two 10.2.3 and 10.2.1, if both of those are related to a particular rule, and section 5.15 states, and again, this is not a non-conformity definition, but where a non-conformity is found, a minor non-conformity is found to not be effectively implemented, a new major non-conformity shall be issued against the client's corrective action process. And then it links to the clause 10.2. So you can see evidence where auditors have been in, they found the same incident again, usually because people have tried to correct the objective evidence rather than correct the statement. To go back to my earlier point, where the evidence has only been addressed and not the statement of the non-conformity, this is what you're going to find. You're going to find that basically the same non-conformity is now going to be raised as a major, but an additional non-conformity will be raised against the corrective action process. Because the idea is that your corrective action process is not effective. Your corrective action plan has failed to address what was raised at the previous audit. 9121, in this particular section, it links again quite nicely to 5.2Q. So where a customer satisfaction target has not been addressed on quality or delivery, additional time is going to be added to the audit. And in that time, there's going to be greater focus in terms of what are the action plans, in terms of what are you doing to address, or what are you doing to address and make sure you meet these customer expectations, you meet the customer targets. So in this, there's going to be a lot greater focus in terms of what is your action plan, what are you doing, and this again, you can link quite clearly to customer satisfaction. The other statistic, looking at the other major non-conformities, we could also see clear evidence in terms of links to the core tools. So when you're looking at the clause numbers within there, you could see these four all appearing high in the top 10 in terms of major non-conformities. So certainly 8352 would be the manufacturing process design output. So most auditors, when raising a non-conformity against a PFMEA, would go to this particular clause because the output of manufacturing process design includes the PFMEA. 8511 is quite self-explanatory. This is where we'd be looking in terms of what is in the control plan. When we're looking at 9111, we're looking at monitoring and measurement of the manufacturing process. So this could be linked to process capability in terms of SPC, but it could also be linked to the implementation of the control plan, the implementation of the PFMEA. So again, we can see the links to the core tools and MSA 71511. Again, that links clearly to a core tool in terms of a requirement. So you can see that the core tools are there in terms of the major non-conformities. And probably one of the core reasons for that is when you look at these clauses, they're probably 2-3 paragraphs in terms of content within a standard. But when you go behind them, there's a whole manual behind it and a whole set of requirements that's additional to this. And it's people's interpretation, people's understanding of these particular core tools in terms of how they've addressed those particular requirements. Okay, so when we're looking at the statistics in terms of minor non-conformities, and again, the information is taken from the website, so we can go on the 20th of April 2025, which are the most current. We could see again within here a clear link, but this clear link is really focusing on the manufacturing process. So when you look at the findings, 8515, total productive maintenance in terms of the equipment used to manufacture a product. FMEAs, again, control plans there again. First offs in terms of verification of job setups, work instructions, error proofing, control of product service provision. All of these feature in the top 10. I mean, it's quite interesting for me that calibration wasn't there. I mean, MSA is there as a major, but calibration wasn't actually featured in terms of the minor non-conformities. So when you're looking at it, the focus is manufacturing process, the manufacturing operations. So it should be in terms of IATF. Within the rules, there's clear requirements that what every auditor should be doing is spending a minimum of a third of their time on the shop floor, looking into basically what is going on, what are the manufacturing operations. And again, this links back to our core values and the core values of the IATF. It's about the manufacturing operations and how those manufacturing operations are being supported. So let's talk very quickly a bit about CARA. So we're going to talk about CARA in terms of the requirements and the requirements to what do you need to do, or what should you be doing in terms of completing the CARA documentation. So hopefully all of you are using CARA. So CARA actually stands for Common Audit Report Application. Again, it was introduced by the IATF. This moved away from each CB having its own reporting structure. Some were very good, some were very bad. But in terms of this, it's a common audit report. So basically everyone has the same information in terms of addressing non-conformities in the same way. So in there, you'll have the non-conformity reports. I'm sure any organisation doing IATF, you're well aware of CARA. You get the non-conformity documents. You have to address through those documents in terms of what actions you're taking to address the non-conformities. So when we're looking at it, the first section that comes up is the containment action. So again, this is a key part. This is where you're looking at the objective evidence. What was the objective evidence, and what have you done against the objective evidence? This is what we're looking at in terms of how have you addressed the containment action. Is there anything further you should do to stop, similar processes from, if you like, leaking in terms of risk to the customer? So we've got to look at the containment. What have we thought about? What have we done? How have we implemented? Section 2 is how have we implemented it? So to start off with, what have we done immediately? What have we done to stop it? It could be we've put a firewall in, we've done something along those lines to try and address it. And from that is the clear evidence that we've actually implemented it. So basically we should be looking at how can we demonstrate, what evidence can I provide to the auditor to show that I've taken my containment action. The next stage we're looking at is root cause. So root cause analysis is the key to the corrective action. And again, if we're thinking about the statement, what are we going to do to address the statement in terms of why did it go wrong? What was it? IATF requires you to identify some form of methodology that you've used to actually understand the root cause. So in terms of that, we could be thinking of examples like 5Y, fishbone, Ishikawa, is not. There's all sorts of mechanisms, methods, but what is your methodology? How have you sat down and hopefully as a team looked at what has gone wrong and how, what do I need to understand? Where are the weaknesses in the system that I've got that I need to address? So key to anything is basically how did we get to the root cause? Yeah. So the root cause results, that's what we've got to think about. Do the methodology. From the methodology, what was the result of the root cause? What do we actually class? And this could be more than one particular item. We could be thinking in terms of root cause, what are the actual root causes that we've identified? I think when I used to, certainly when I was auditing, I used to think some of the best practice was where people would actually look at the root cause in terms of the root cause of the problem, but maybe also try and identify the root cause in terms of the escape. So how did it go wrong? Yeah. So what went wrong is going to be the root cause, but also why was it allowed to go wrong in terms of looking at definition? And again, we should provide evidence in terms of what we've identified as root cause. So it could be through an 8D in terms of we've been through our root cause methodology, our results in terms of what do we actually believe has caused the non-conformity, and from then we can start thinking how are we going to address it. So hopefully this is going to be through systemic corrective actions, and obviously we need to know when and who is going to do those corrective actions, but the corrective action needs to be focused on the root cause. Whatever we're going to do, we need to be focused on the root cause, not just the operator didn't do as they were told. Tell the operator to do as he's told is a systemic corrective action. We need to look into this in detail in terms of what is the weakness in the system? What could we do better? Is it if it is the operators not doing it, are we not training the operators correctly? Are we not informing the operators correctly, etc.? This is what we've got to think about. This is what we've got to do, understand and try and address. Okay. And then we need to show that we've actually done what we've set out to do, in terms of whoever was tasked with completing the particular task. Have they actually done it? And here we provide evidence that it has actually been completed. It also asks for evidence of the implementation. So we need to demonstrate. So it could be through, a change to a particular it could even be photographs in terms of something we've done to the manufacturing process, etc. Or it could be documentation in terms of something we've changed. Multiple things could go in here, but we need to provide evidence that we've actually implemented corrective action. And then finally, we need to demonstrate how we've verified it was actually working. Yeah. So that basically whatever we've implemented does actually work. Ideally, this is going to be through something like an audit, a particular focused audit on the non-conformity. Has the action actually worked? Have we been down? Have we tested it? Have we looked at the process? Or, if it's not in a manufacturing process, have we looked at that particular process in terms of maybe taking other examples to see that the non-conformity has not only been implemented, but is no longer capable of it actually happening. We've actually addressed the complete cause in terms of the non-conformity. So, what time is it? So, in terms of content, we've got through that. But looking at our next webinars, we've got one in July this year. So in July this year, we're going to be looking at 25 years of the IATF and its achievements. So hopefully you can subscribe to our newsletter as well. So follow us on LinkedIn. We'd also like to point out the YouTube channels, along with that, the videos that you can watch on the YouTube channels from the SMMT and the IOB. So looking at the particular audit techniques, etc. So if you want any tips in terms of auditing, then the YouTube channel, a top place. If you're not actually getting our newsletter, please subscribe in terms of that, and we'll make sure that you get our monthly newsletter telling you about events in terms of IATF, in terms of core tools, etc., publications. We're also on LinkedIn, and if you need to order any of the publications, again, please get involved. So just a quick thing in terms of what courses we've got coming up. So we've got our core tools courses coming up quite quickly, and 19th to 23rd of May is the next one. We do usually an alternative month. So 1 month we're actually online, the next month we're actually face-to-face here in Birmingham. Or alternatively, if you want, we could come to you. We've also got our lead auditor training, which is happening again monthly, alternative months in terms of one month face-to-face, the next month online virtually. So again, if you're from abroad, if you want to join online in terms of the virtual, please feel free. We also run the VDA courses, and again, we're doing those monthly at the moment. So again, each month online, followed by face-to-face. So please have a look, please keep informed. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to look at some of the questions and some of the answers. So Niall's going to assist me on this. So he's going to answer some of the questions. So
yeah, Steve, and hopefully the delegates that are attending are going to assist as well by hopefully asking some questions. So you've got the Q&A tab on the top of your screen. So just click into that and send over any questions you've got, and we will do our best to answer them. Also, just mention about the poll. So there are a couple of poll questions embedded in the Teams invite. So if you go again, if you click on poll along the top of your Teams screen, you should see 3 questions. Again, it would be great if you could answer those questions while simultaneously asking questions. So yeah, as we receive the questions, we will attempt to answer them. So question just come in there about, do you deliver any CSR customer specific requirements training, i.e. VW 4MLQ, for example, which is a topical one. Obviously that's just been updated, 4MLQ concrete. So
yeah, I mean, it's not specifically. I mean, obviously, generally through the IATF lead auditor course, or certainly, I mean, if you're talking Volkswagen, a lot of those requirements. Something I've actually, as a delegate, I've recently been on things like the M&A course. So in that, there's a lot of requirements there from Volkswagen themselves in terms of the the particular requirements for Volkswagen are covered in depth in that particular course.
yeah,
So I don't know if that would be interested, but we don't actually go line through because it's too broad a subject in terms of it's relevant to your organisation.
yeah,
But certainly through that and maybe the PSCR courses as well in the core tools, a lot is focused on Volkswagen as an example. But then through the lead auditor, we certainly go through the course customer specific requirements and how to assess those, how to to look at it in terms of implementation.
yeah. And again, Steve mentioned it earlier, but worth just subscribing to the IATF Global Oversight website. Just need to enter your email address. You'll then get notified of any updates to, well, anything on the website. Hopefully those of you that have subscribed will have noticed the sanctioned interpretations that were issued this week. But also if there are updates to customer specific requirements, you would get notified through the IATF website. So please do subscribe. And Steve, it might be worth just saying a few words about your role and your experience as well.
Sorry,
we've had a question about how often is it recommended that a person attends an auditor course? So you might just want to say a few words about your experience and maybe try and answer that question at the same time.
Sorry, I didn't really introduce myself at the start. So myself, Stephen Power, I've been at Industry Forum for 2 years now. So prior to that, I was a third-party auditor. I did that for 21 years. So in that time, I worked for 8 different certification bodies. I did work it all out at the end. 27 different countries I audited in. So that was on 5 different continents. So in terms of experience, very experienced in terms of IATF. I've also been, recently got involved in terms of the oversight. So doing things like, helping with witness audits, certificate body trainers. So doing the third-party audit training. So in terms of experience, quite a lot of experience. But the question was, again, how often to maybe consider looking at auditor courses. I mean, for some, VDA being an example, there is an actual requirement to requalify in terms of maintaining certification. For IATF, I've had people, I've had a few people on the course, and maybe after 5 to 10 years want to go back and refresh. in terms of their skills, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, obviously, as the standard sort of gets updated, again, be particular, you know, to understand what those changes were and how do you audit those changes. So certainly, I would always look to try and keep it valid, but probably the main key thing is to keep auditing. So I think that's one of the key things. A lot of the time, I think a lot of people might do an auditor course purely as a CV filler. You know, something there to actually say, you know, oh yeah, I understand IATF because I've been on the course. But to fully understand it, you need to keep auditing. So that could be internal audits, second party audits, but make sure you're keeping active in terms of doing audits. And I'm always a big advocate that the most important thing to be an auditor is to have the ability to learn. Yeah. And when you're doing the audit, what am I learning myself in terms of what information do I now have that I didn't previously have prior to the audit? It could be on a process, it could be how a particular requirement has been implemented by a different organisation, but always trying to learn from the audit and the audit experience.
And again, the focus is really on competency, isn't it? And maintaining competency.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's no rule that says you must reattend you have to, yeah.
In terms of how often it has to be done. Again, customer specific requirements, VDA, there is an expiry date on every VDA certification. But again, part of the VDA or maintaining VDA qualification is how many audits you do. But the standard itself does say a minimum number of audits. Yeah. So when you're looking at 723 and the qualification requirements, within there, it does talk about a minimum number of audits.
A couple of questions we can probably run through. Is the CARA platform of mandatory use in the UK? So every certification body, there are 38 IATF recognised certification bodies, and every one of them is required to use CARA for IATF 16949 audits. So for IATF 16949 third-party audits, CARA is mandatory. The other thing that's worth saying almost, and the subject of this webinar is non-conformities. They are at the sort of core of the IATF kind of standard almost, that they are the things that drive improvement to organisations' quality management systems. So it's a really important part of the IATF scheme that auditors raise non-conformities, and those non-conformities drive action to improve the organisation's QMS. Yeah, interesting question. Are third-party auditors asked by the IATF to focus on certain areas of a client system based on results from previous years regarding number of major minor NCs?
So, I mean, certainly as part of the recertification audit, I mean, when it comes to the recertification audit, and again, if you look through the rules, through most certification bodies' own process, there'll certainly be an additional requirement of recertification to look back at the previous audit results. So what were the previous audit results? Are there any areas particularly showing weakness? If it goes back to the earlier classification, so when we're talking about the upgrade of a minor nonconformity to a major nonconformity, if it's found again at another audit, you know, there's only going to be 2 surveillance audits in a certification cycle. But at that particular time, if it's found again, it would be escalated anyway to a major, and again, that would require a special focus audit. There's no guidelines in terms of where to focus, but obviously, I think one area which does prompt auditors to go and look in a particular area are the sanction interpretations and the frequently asked questions. And you can understand some logic behind that, because when these sanction interpretations are updated, there's a need. The IATF has seen there's a need to add this additional information in terms of a particular requirement, or take away in some cases. But then it's a change, and the focus is going to be, this has changed, this is some area that we have been asked to look at. So by its own definition, and again, if you go back and you're as sad as me, and you actually do look at the trends in terms of non-conformities, you could probably actually see within there, when there's a sanction interpretation or a frequently asked question, you see that particular clause come into the categorisation in terms of the top 10. So I think in terms of focus and, if you like, direction, you'll probably find that more so through the sanction interpretations than the frequently asked questions.
Yeah, and that leads on to another question. Will sanction interpretations be incorporated into an update to the standard?
Yep. So in all cases before, yes, sanction interpretations, they are changes, if you like, they're amendments. Other standards don't have the sanction interpretations the way IATF uses them. So each time the standard has been reissued, then the sanction interpretations are taken and implemented, not only on the standard but also in the rules. I mean, there's clear evidence on the recently published 6th edition rules. A lot of the sanction interpretations that came out have actually been implemented fully into the 6th edition rules. And again, you can see some of the clauses from previous, from the, if you like, the old ISO TS appeared into the IATF 16949 2016 edition.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions?
Do you offer VDA 6.3 training?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah. So we, like I said, we run 6.3 once a month. Once a month. Alternative months, we do face-to-face here in Birmingham in terms of our office, or we also do it online through virtual training.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a course that's run virtually in terms of it follows the same content, the same exercises, and we are licensed, so it is valid. You will be on the VDA system in terms of a certified auditor if you go all the way through the process.
Yeah. Interesting question about why CARA doesn't align with the 8D process. So CARA refers to S1 and S2 rather than D1 and D2.
Look, I mean, so if you looked at the 8D process, I mean, the first one would be, if you like, define the team or define the problem. So in terms of define the problem, the auditor's done it for you. The statement of non-conformity is probably going to be your D1, if you like, in terms of that's the statement, in terms of that is what the problem is. Down to yourselves to define the team in terms of that. But yes, certainly the rest of it, if you like, is following it down to, and I don't know why the IATF hasn't put it in, congratulate the team right at the end in terms of the 8th discipline. Yeah, but certainly there's clear evidence most of it aligns. It's maybe the first 2 key points in terms of defining and the team itself.
Yeah. Question here about calibration and what's your opinion on the certification requirements for third-party calibration companies or OE equipment manufacturers when the article under inspection is specialised? So I think that's someone that might have received an NC linked to.
So if it's specialised equipment, I mean, I haven't got it in front of me, but again, there's a sanction interpretation.
10, yeah.
Is it 10 or 12?
I don't know.
But the sanction interpretation
one that was revised many times.
It has been revised, I think, is it 3 or 5 times? But within that, it talks about basically what to do in terms of it. I think a lot of people, certainly if it's a specialist piece of equipment or it's the OEM in terms of the equipment, again, you might have some sort of contract. What the requirement is there is for you to assess the capability of the calibration organisation. So you should actually have some assessment. That particular requirement is not there for something that could be calibrated by somebody else. Yeah. So, something simple like your set of gauge blocks, you can't send those away to someone and say, well, basically I can use this in terms of I don't need a 17025 accredited company to calibrate slip blocks. I could use somebody else as long as I've approved them.
Yeah.
And one of the key things is, and again, it's something we were talking about last week, is when you're looking at it, how many of you have, fully understand where the product's going? Is there any conformance of product on there? And again, there could be legal requirements that would demand calibration of the equipment in terms of, any particular issue. That's the need and the importance in terms of demonstrating why do we actually have to use somebody, probably more expensive in terms of accreditation, but to demonstrate that basically what we've used has full traceability and we have full faith in our own results.
Check out SI 10, sanction interpretation number 10 under IATF 16949. I think that might help just explain a little bit about where equipment manufacturers can provide calibration in certain circumstances. Is there an internal audit requirement to justify the NC level, major versus minor?
There's nothing in the standard in terms of the classification. I mean, in our own course, we talk about people raising minor or major. I mean, like I said, there's nothing there, but best practice, yes, I would certainly have a different level in terms of major or minor, because obviously where the greatest risk, where you've raised a non-conformity that that has the most impact, and if you go back to the assessment again, impact and occurrence, that might drive in terms of your own system where you need to focus in terms of your efforts. And again, how do you close out a major compared to a minor? Because both are different in terms of the rules. Closing out a major or closing out a minor has different requirements in terms of that. And likewise, internally, you'd probably look at a major in terms of classification. Could also be notification. Could be, you are going to inform your senior management when you're finding major non-conformities, internally in terms of that. Do they need to know about every minor? Maybe not. But in terms of majors, there might be issues that they actually need to understand. So, yeah, it's best practice, but no, there's not officially a requirement for major or minor.
Yeah. And then last one, what's the process when the VDA 6.3 auditor certificate becomes outdated? Well, again, there's a way of renewing that, and
there is a mechanism. Some of it involves, I mean, no 6.3 expert. I think you're probably more of an expert in terms of that, but certainly it's based on how many audits you've done.
Yeah.
In terms of have you done a minimum amounts of audits, etc., and might require some sort of refresher course in terms of the overall requirements.
Yeah, but if you've got a specific question on that, just email courses@industryforum.co.uk and someone will come back to you.
Okay.
That's it. And we're kind of at the we've overrun, I don't know.
Okay, so thank you ever so much, everyone, for participation. So again, big thank you. Like I said, hopefully we're planning on another webinar in July. This time we're going to be looking at 25 years of the IATF, its achievements, what were the original objectives of IATF, how have they done against those objectives, etc. So going forward, this is what we're going to be looking at in July. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Thanks all for your time and questions.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you again.